You know, my life is good. I'm not sitting here, twiddling my thumbs and feeling sorry for myself. I don't have that. But I do believe life is always better when shared.
Decades before Gayle King became a household name, one moment shattered her marriage and reshaped how she trusted the world around her. Behind Gayle King's calm, steady presence is something a lot deeper and, honestly, a lot more painful than most people ever realized. Her recent goodbye has people worried, and once you hear why, it all starts to connect in a way that feels almost unbelievable. Imagine knowing the exact minute your life changed forever. That moment shaped everything. And trust me, what ties that heartbreak to her emotional farewell today? You'll want to hear this till the very end. Breaking down Gayle King's goodbye message. A calm but heavy moment unfolded during a recent CBS Mornings broadcast, and something about the tone felt different right from the start. Gayle King appeared on screen, but the usual steady delivery carried a noticeable weight, almost like emotion sat just beneath every word. A simple introduction turned into something deeper when Gayle King explained that the morning would begin a little differently. A statement came out about heavy hearts across the studio, and that alone made everything feel more serious than usual. A quiet question naturally came to mind. What could cause such a shift in tone on a morning show known for calm and balanced reporting? As the segment continued, the focus moved to Savannah Guthrie's family situation, particularly the disappearance of a mother. That detail alone already carried emotional weight, but the way Gayle King delivered the information made everything feel even more intense. A voice that usually sounded firm began to shake slightly, and pauses started to appear between sentences. Emotions slowly became more visible, and at some point, words did not come out as smoothly as expected. Another question formed almost instantly. When a seasoned journalist with decades of experience begins to struggle on air, what does that reveal about the situation being reported? Gayle King described the situation as unimaginable and deeply frightening, and the words did not sound like routine reporting. The delivery carried a sense of personal impact, almost as if the story moved beyond professional duty into something deeply human. A moment came where Gayle King admitted that the situation stayed on the mind and refused to fade away. That kind of statement felt honest, but also heavy. A line followed about a heartbreaking for Savannah Guthrie, and that beat line seemed to stay with many people watching. Why did that particular moment feel so different from a normal news segment? Perhaps because the emotion felt real, not controlled, not filtered, and not carefully packaged. A sense of empathy filled the room, but at the same time, a sense of concern quietly grew. If someone known for composure appeared overwhelmed, did that mean the situation carried even more weight than described? As the segment moved forward, the emotional tone did not settle down. Instead, the intensity seemed to grow little by little. Words came out slower, and each sentence carried a deeper meaning. A specific phrase stood out and caught attention. Gayle King explained that everyone involved tried to make sense of something that made no sense. That line alone already felt powerful, but another part followed that raised even more concern. A mention of struggling and gasping for something added another layer to the moment. That word, gasping, did not sound like a casual choice. That word sounded like someone searching for answers in a situation filled with confusion and fear. Why use such a strong word during a live broadcast? That question stayed in the air as the segment continued. Language often reveals more than intended, and that single word made the moment feel even more serious. Outside of the emotional broadcast, another layer of uncertainty quietly sat in the background. Conversations about the future at CBS began to surface, and Gayle King addressed some of those discussions in a separate moment. A statement shared that everyone within the building expressed a desire to keep Gayle King in place and appreciated the work being done. That sounded reassuring at first, but another detail quickly followed. A mention came about having no clear idea what direction the show might take once a contract reached its end in May 2026. That detail introduced uncertainty into an already emotional situation. A simple question came to mind again. Could professional uncertainty add to emotional pressure during already difficult moments? Gayle King also made it clear that negotiations would not take place in public, which added another layer of tension. Silence around decisions often leaves room for speculation, and speculation rarely brings comfort. During the broadcast itself, something else stood out in a subtle but noticeable way. Co-hosts remained present, but no clear or strong response appeared during the most emotional moments. That absence created a quiet gap in the flow of the segment. A question formed naturally. When one person struggles emotionally on air, should support not become more visible? The lack of clear reassurance or verbal support added another dimension to the situation. Even though presence remained, active engagement seemed limited. That detail did not go unnoticed. A network statement later described Gayle King as a valued part of CBS, which sounded supportive. But that message came from executives rather than from the immediate on-air environment. That difference mattered more than expected. Support delivered in real time often carries more weight than statements released afterward. All these moments together created a bigger picture that felt hard to ignore. A respected journalist showed visible emotion while reporting on a deeply troubling situation. Words carried weight, pauses carried meaning, and small details began to stand out more than usual. A question lingered through it all. Was this simply a moment of human empathy, or did this reflect something deeper beneath the surface? Emotional honesty can connect strongly with an audience, but emotional strain can also raise concern. That balance remained unclear. At the center of everything stood a human response to a painful story. Professional roles often require distance, control, and structure, but moments like this reveal something more real. A voice shaking slightly, a pause lasting a bit longer than expected, a word chosen that carries deeper meaning. All these details create a moment that feels genuine. And perhaps that is what stayed with many people, not just the news itself, but the way the news was delivered. Not just the facts, but the feeling behind the facts. In the end, one thought remained steady. When someone known for strength suddenly shows a moment of vulnerability, it makes you pause and wonder what could be heavy enough to break that armor. It hints at a deeper story unfolding behind the scenes. And trust me, what comes next, the marriage story no one saw coming, is something you need to hear till the very end. The marriage story no one saw coming. Everything started in a way that looked completely normal from the outside, almost like one of those relationships people point at and say looks stable, looks settled, looks safe. The marriage began in 1982, and at first glance everything seemed to fall into place. A home was built, 2 children came into the picture, Kirby and Will, and life moved in a rhythm that many people would describe as steady. But then, looking back now, a quiet question starts to form. Does anything ever really fall apart suddenly, or do cracks begin long before anyone notices? One interesting detail that always stands out involves Oprah Winfrey, who was not just a guest at the wedding, but actually the maid of honor. That alone says a lot about how close that friendship was. Yet even in that moment that should have felt full of joy, Oprah later shared that something felt off. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet feeling that something was not quite right.
And I felt embarrassed every time I put the weight back on. So I accepted it.
The ceremony, according to that reflection, did not feel joyful and instead carried a strange, almost uncomfortable energy. Now think about that for a second. How often does someone sense something early on but push that feeling aside because everything else looks fine? There was also a moment that seemed small at the time, but now feels like one of those warning signs people only recognize later. During a visit to the house, a woman called asking to speak with William. When the call was answered, the response given was that nobody was there. That kind of moment might seem easy to brush off, right? A quick explanation, a simple misunderstanding, something that does not deserve too much attention. And that is exactly what happened. The incident did not raise alarms back then. No suspicion took root. Life continued as usual. But looking back now, another question naturally comes up. How many times do people ignore signs simply because the full truth feels too uncomfortable to consider? Then came the moment that changed everything, and not slowly, not over time, but in one single unforgettable instant. The date was June 24th, 1990, and the time was 9:16 p.m. That level of precision alone says something about how deeply that moment stayed fixed in memory. After returning home from a trip with the children, something completely unexpected unfolded. Inside the home, in the bedroom, there was a scene that left no space for confusion or explanation. William was in bed with another woman, and both were completely exposed. No misunderstanding, no room for stories, no chance to explain anything away. And here is where another thought comes in. What would that kind of moment feel like? To go from normal life straight into something that instantly rewrites everything. The woman involved was not a stranger either, which adds another layer that makes the situation even harder to process. The woman was married and also known within the couple's circle. That detail alone raises even more questions. How does trust break at that level? How does someone process betrayal that comes not from one direction, but from two? And maybe even more importantly, how does someone stay composed in a moment like that? One thing that stands out strongly is how clearly that moment was described later on. There was an acknowledgement that if the situation had looked different, maybe if both individuals had been clothed, there could have been some attempt to explain things away. Maybe there could have been a conversation, maybe confusion, maybe even denial. But the reality of what was seen made that impossible.
Something is wrong. I've lost my mind. Don't even be mad. Don't
Right.
even be- we've just never had anything that was worth.
The clarity of the situation removed every possible excuse. And that leads to another simple but powerful question. Does the truth hurt more when there is no room left for doubt? After that night, everything changed, but not in a loud or public way right away. For a long time, very little was said openly. There was an attempt to fix things through counseling, which shows that the situation was not handled in a rushed or emotional way. Effort was made to understand, to process, and maybe even to repair what had been broken. But eventually, the marriage ended in 1993, closing a chapter that had lasted 11 years on paper, but had clearly shifted long before that final moment. Years later, small pieces of the story began to come out in public conversations. During an interview with Will Smith, there was a simple but direct statement about being married to someone who cheated. There was also mention of counseling and healing, which suggests that the journey after the betrayal was not just about ending a marriage, but also about rebuilding emotionally. And that brings up another important thought. How long does it really take to heal from something like that? Interestingly, many years later, in 2016, William Bumpus made a public apology. That is more than 2 decades after the incident itself. The apology included an admission of regret and acknowledgement of the impact of that decision. There was also recognition of how the situation was handled with grace. Now that raises another question. Does an apology that comes years later still carry weight? Or does timing change how it is received? What makes this entire situation even more complex is how the relationship was described afterward. Despite everything that happened, there was still acknowledgement that William was a great husband in many ways, with the issue centered around a lack of commitment to one partner. That kind of perspective is not something everyone would expect. It shows a level of reflection that goes beyond anger. And then there is the approach to co-parenting, which was clearly prioritized over holding on to bitterness. There was a strong belief that children should come first, even in the middle of personal hurt. That idea alone brings up a meaningful question. How does someone choose peace and responsibility over anger in a situation like that? Today, life has moved forward, but the story still carries lessons that feel very real. There is openness about still being interested in finding a meaningful relationship again, described as a desire for a great love story. That detail adds a sense of hope to everything that came before. After betrayal, After heartbreak, after years of silence, there is still a willingness to believe in love again. And maybe that is the biggest question of all. After everything falls apart, after the silence and the setbacks, what really gives someone the strength to stand back up and try again? It's a question that lingers, and the answer might surprise you. So stay with me as we uncover what's next for Gayle. What's next for Gayle? A quiet shift began to show in how Gayle King chose to handle stress and personal healing, and the approach felt both simple and surprisingly different at the same time. Instead of sticking to regular meditation, which many people often talk about, Gayle King leaned into something called sound bath therapy. At first, the name alone could make anyone pause for a second. Sound bath? What does that even mean? Gayle King explained that the name could easily confuse anyone because no water is involved at all. Gayle King shared that the experience felt more like waves of sound moving across the body rather than water touching the skin. During a session with an instructor named Michelle, instruments were gently moved around the body, creating vibrations and tones that filled the space in a calm and steady way. That description alone might make anyone curious. Could sound really calm the mind better than silence? Gayle King admitted that traditional meditation had always been a struggle because the mind refused to stay still. Thoughts would wander, jump from one idea to another, and refuse to settle. That kind of experience sounds familiar, right? But with sound baths, Gayle King explained that the mind did not need to fight for focus because the sound itself guided the experience. The process removed pressure and replaced it with something more natural and easier to follow. At the same time, while personal healing continued in a quiet and steady way, professional life did not slow down at all. In March 2026, Gayle King signed a new deal with CBS News, putting an end to all the rumors that had been circulating for months. And honestly, how often do rumors grow bigger than reality? Gayle King addressed the situation directly and made it clear that all the talk about stepping away had been exaggerated. That kind of response showed confidence and control, especially in an industry where speculation spreads quickly. The new agreement did more than just secure a role on CBS Mornings. The deal also opened doors for new projects, showing that this was not just about staying in place, but about growing even further. Gayle King described the commitment in a simple but powerful way, saying that full dedication remained the focus moving forward. 14 years as a co-anchor also became a moment worth pausing on. That kind of consistency does not happen by accident, does it? To mark that milestone, Gayle King wore the same yellow dress that had been worn on the very first day of the role. That small tradition carried meaning. It showed memory, stability, and a sense of appreciation for the journey. Behind all of this, strong support played a big role, especially during difficult personal moments. During a challenging divorce, Oprah Winfrey stood close and offered something deeply meaningful. Oprah Winfrey gave Gayle King a heart-shaped diamond necklace created from a pair of earrings. That gesture alone said a lot without needing too many words. Oprah Winfrey shared a message that one day the heart would feel joy again. And that message stayed close, both emotionally and physically. Gayle King has kept that necklace on almost all the time since then. And that makes sense, right? Sometimes small physical reminders can carry the biggest emotional support. Looking back, handling difficult moments has never been new for Gayle King. One of the most surprising examples came from a fear that many people quietly carry. Fear of flying is something that stops a lot of people from even stepping onto a plane. But instead of avoiding that fear, Gayle King faced it in one of the boldest ways possible by joining a Blue Origin space flight. Just thinking about that decision raises a question. Who goes from fearing flights to traveling into space? After that experience, Gayle King shared a feeling of confidence that changed everything. A belief formed that anything could be possible after facing something that big. That kind of mindset shift does not just happen overnight, does it? It comes from pushing limits and stepping into uncomfortable spaces. Beyond personal challenges, Gayle King has also used a public platform to speak about mental health, especially through CBS specials focused on reducing stigma. That effort shows a deeper purpose beyond daily work on television. Conversations around mental health are not always easy, and many people still hesitate to speak openly. So when someone with a strong voice chooses to highlight that topic, it creates space for others to feel seen and understood. And really, what could be more important than that? All these choices, from sound therapy to career decisions to personal growth, come together to show a path that feels real, steady, and quietly powerful. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.